a lot of times we take ownership over behaviors and think that like that's just a part of our identity when it was probably something that we adapted to survive. It was something that we needed at some point in our life, but it's not actually who we are.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Legacy Speaks. My name is Tiera Hillsman, licensed professional counselor and emotional wellness coach. Today, I'm bringing you another dope conversation with another amazing clinician, okay? And so I'm going to introduce her. Her name is Tiera Couch, and she's an LCSW. And so Tiera, once again, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. Can you let the people know a little bit about you, who you are, where you're at, and a little bit about your practice and the work that you do?
Yeah, so I'm a licensed clinical social worker. My specialties are childhood trauma and anxiety. In my practice, I center Black women and LGBTQ, but I'm an inclusive practice, but those are the people that I center. Those are the people that seek me and that I'm usually seeking. I'm from Detroit, and I practice out of Atlanta and Detroit.
Awesome sauce. That's amazing. All right. So today we're going to get into a conversation that is near and dear to my heart. Oftentimes when we think about the concept of childhood trauma, we immediately go to like ACEs. And so for anybody who doesn't know what ACEs is, those are adverse childhood experiences. And with my specialties are anxiety and life transitions, I always like to encourage clients to take a look at their trauma history as well. And so with that being your experience, can you let the people know what are some things that we need to be mindful of, especially when it comes to addressing our childhood trauma?
I really think that we need to understand that like everything impacts us. And a lot of times we think about experiences that we had as children, and if they weren't direct traumas, then we don't understand that there's still a long-term impact. And that can be if we observe somebody else being abused, or if we experienced our parents dealing with like financial issues, things like that. Those things can still be considered trauma, and people think that it has to be like something significant, something very serious to be a trauma, when that's not always the case.
Very, very much so. And thank you for acknowledging that, because immediately when we do our assessments, we're looking at the various forms of trauma, like you mentioned. So not just the physical, sexual, emotional abuse or neglect, but what are those things that you felt were an actual threat to your way of living, or just a threat to your own livelihood? Like you mentioned, that financial trauma or watching other people experience that as well. Were there any other things that you felt we need to be mindful of, not only just childhood trauma, but just trauma in general?
Yeah, the way that we don't always think about how trauma impacts every aspect of our life. It can impact us physically, mentally, how we show up in our relationships, how we see ourselves, how we think the world sees us. And a lot of times, some of the ways that we show up, and what I see a lot of with a lot of my clients, is that some of their trauma symptoms are positive, would be considered positive, like they're high achieving, hyper independent, always really dependable, but not really seeing that it's to the detriment of them, and it is a symptom of trauma, but everybody else around them is benefiting from them. So it doesn't seem like something they will want to necessarily think they need to address.
Oh my gosh, Tiara, girl, you better get into that, because a lot of people forget those components, right? Especially when it comes to the way that we show up in our relationships. And so what may be beneficial to other people, we may consider that a reason or a motivating factor to continue with that same behavior. Like, for example, the people-pleasing component, or maybe even the codependent relationships and things like that. And you touched a lot on the concept of identity. And so can we explore what that looks like to root our identities in our trauma?
Ooh, one of the things that I always have to help my clients with is kind of identifying your voice from somebody else's voice. And a lot of times our identity is kind of rooted in how we've been conditioned and not necessarily in what we actually want for ourselves. And that can be like if we had an overbearing parent that, thought that you should be an attorney, now you're an attorney and you hate it. Or you were body shamed, or you just components making you feel like you weren't enough. And now that voice is way louder than your actual voice, and your identity isn't yours.
Oh, I definitely agree, especially with that concept of that voice. When I work with clients, I remind them to take the opportunity to filter through the noise, especially
Mhm.
for my clients who are dealing with that anxiety, or the types of clients who are always picking themselves apart. One, I'm telling them, come downstairs. If you have an opportunity to just like take those thoughts and write them out on paper and figure out where's the origin of that particular thought. Is it coming from you? Is it coming from somebody else? Is it
Yeah.
coming from society? Is it coming from media? Find the origin of it and check the validity of that thought to determine whether or not that thing is even true.
Yeah, I want to add to that too. A lot of times we take ownership over behaviors and think that like that's just a part of our identity when it was probably something that we adapted to survive. It was something that we needed at some point in our life, but it's not actually who we are.
Absolutely, absolutely. Funny enough, I was having a conversation with a client sometime this week where I was just like, they kept saying, I'm impulsive, I'm impulsive. And I'm like, stop labeling yourself as
Mhm.
being impulsive. You engage in impulsive behaviors, but that's not who you are. That's what you learned during the process of your life. And so learning to look at things from a factual perspective, yes, identify how those things are impacting you emotionally, but don't root your identity in that thing.
Absolutely.
Hey y'all, it's Tiera. Make sure you head over to shoplegacysbks.com to check out the latest gear. As always, we have the classic therapy is dope crew neck as well as tees. So head over to cop your crew neck today. It comes in heather navy, that cardinal red, as well as that beautiful gold that we love to see. So head over to purchase yours, not only for yourself, but also for a friend as well. And we are offering free shipping right now. So head over to shoplegacysbks.com to cop all of your therapy's dope gear and check out all the other additional merch as well.
Yeah, good stuff. So even with the concept of anxiety, because that's one of your specialties as well, how do you educate clients on the concept of anxiety? Because immediately when we think about it, a lot of people are like, well, I have control issues, or I
Mhm.
have like this fear. And I remind people that it's more than just the fear of the future, it's the fear of the loss of control in a future event or an anticipated event. Are there any other ways that you approach psychoeducation when it comes to anxiety?
So a lot of times with my clients, when they talk about like having control issues, we kind of identify what is that control actually trying to do for you. All of these things are a function. They're trying to do something for you. And a lot of times they're trying to protect themselves for something. They're trying to be prepared for something. So being able to understand why is this thing showing up for you is
Mhm.
a way that I try to, do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So peeling back the layers and seeing where did this behavior start, like
Mhm.
everybody's origin story and
Yeah.
whatnot. Yeah, that's really cool. And then also seeing how your parents' parenting style, or maybe even
Absolutely.
like the whole attachment styles, those are things that are cool to explore as well.
Yeah.
Are there any other things that you teach clients about, especially when it comes to the merging of exploring trauma and anxiety?
Yeah, so when I first started, I was predominantly just working with children, and then I was working with children and their families, and I could see firsthand how these things are developing and how they relate to the world. And then I started working with adults, and now I'm seeing their inner child still needing those same things. So I like to like tie that back in and just really kind of explore like, when did this come up for you? How do you feel about that? Just being able to make those connections because a lot of times people think and I hear this all the time. It was in the past, but we carry everything with us, especially if we didn't address it.
Absolutely. Unaddressed emotions show up in our behavior. So thank you for taking that time to do that. Another component that I greatly appreciated that you mentioned was asking the client specifically, how did that make you feel? And so for anybody who has constantly said that rhetoric of like, oh, that was in the past, you don't have to
Mhm.
address it. Please take a moment to acknowledge how those things have made you feel and how they currently are making you feel, even in this current space that you're in.
Yeah, and how much are you anticipating that feeling again? So you're avoiding, those certain environments and those certain engagements by, trying to control your behavior or control somebody else's response.
Oh, can we talk about controlling somebody else's response? Because we understand like those cognitive distortions of like mind reading and trying
Yeah.
to predict the future. What's your take on that?
Well, I always think about like just finding ways to protect yourself. Is there if I can predict what somebody else is going to say, then I can be ready. But the reality is that's not what it's given. You didn't predict what somebody else was going to say, and now you're having a conversation, and they're just probably not playing out the way that you want to play it. So
Absolutely. And I think that's another component that a lot of people forget in terms of like anxiety, anticipating things that may or may not happen. And so you have like all of these plans, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and that greatly impacts your ability to create a healthy relationship with the moment. As a matter of fact, you're not even giving yourself an opportunity to see whether or not you're capable of handling the experience.
Absolutely. I always talk about kind of like if we're living a life of trying to avoid pain, then you're not really building your capacity for pain. And we can't avoid it, so we got to deal with it.
Exactly. And I know for those, I often talk about this, like dialectical behavior therapy. We often say this enough where it's like pain is a part of life, but suffering is a choice. And so understanding that like pain is unavoidable, but trust your capacity to be able to handle that pain. Trust the fact that you have gifts, talents, resources, as well as the tools within your toolkit to be able to utilize that to get through that.
And trust is such an important word. So often people are, especially people with anxiety, struggling to trust their decisions. But a lot of the clients that I work with, they've gotten themselves so far through so many things and they never let themselves down. It's like, okay, you have all of this evidence. You can trust yourself. This voice that's telling you that you can't, it's not yours. And it's not rooted in anything that's true.
Ooh, that is so good. So separating the perceived reality from the actual reality is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. So when we're even talking about the concept of like life transitions, because you mentioned this, like individuals have been able to move through life successfully. They've built the resiliency. They have those components that help them to survive thus far. How do you help clients navigate the anxiety that comes with life transitions as they're also doing the work of challenging that childhood trauma?
Just kind of a lot of times when people feel something, they think that something's wrong. Like if you're anxious about something, it doesn't necessarily mean that something is wrong. This might be a valid response to what you're experiencing. If you are making a big change, you're moving, you're starting a new career, you should be a little nervous. It's new, you never did it before. So kind of being comfortable with things that are just emotions that we have as human beings, and then kind of navigating, okay, how do you make sure that you are taking care of yourself while you're experiencing this stress?
Oh, y'all, please take note of that because that was so multi-layered, right? She's reminding you to put the human in humanity and understanding that it's okay to build a healthy relationship with our emotions. Our emotions give us the signs and they help us to be able to explore the certain aspects of ourselves that we're trying to push away. Yes, be logical, have your reasoning, but also understand that your emotions provide specific feedback to help you make informed decisions. And then another thing that you mentioned as well, Tiera, that was super important is checking in with yourself and making sure that you're taking care of yourself during the process as well as after the process as well.
Absolutely. So many times we think we have to wait till later to take care of ourselves, when if we wait till later, then we're probably not able to even show up the way we need to.
So can you let the people know, what does that practically look like, taking care of yourself throughout this life transition process?
Hey, lovely. Shout out to you because I know mental and emotional wellness is important to you. If it wasn't, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. But lean in really quickly because I know sometimes it's really hard to create a plan and actually sticking to it. So let's take your mental health to another level. Ever wonder what keeps you from fully executing? Ever wonder how you can build the confidence for decision making? Well, guess what? You're not alone and I'm here to help. So head over to mentalhealthgoals.com for your free mental health plan. It'll give you practical strategies for addressing your current mental health needs. But first, you got to tap in. So head over to mentalhealthgoals.com to receive your free mental health action plan today. Do it right now. mentalhealthgoals.com. See you soon.
It really depends on what you need. Like for me, I'll talk because for me, like I need to be alone sometimes. I need naps. I need nature. I need to read a book. I need those are things that I need. For some clients, they need to listen to music. They need to talk to a good friend. Thinking about the things that give you peace and joy, and thinking about also what your capacity is for your relationships. Sometimes we have relationships that require a lot more emotional labor, and when we're stressed, that might not be the relationship that we engage in the most.
Absolutely. That needs assessment is so pivotal. Oftentimes when I ask clients, especially the ones that are like still building up their self-awareness, I'm like, what do you need in this moment? And sometimes they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, take a moment to be fully present and ask yourself, what are you lacking? We can always identify what's wrong with the situation, but think about the times where things have went right and what helped you to get through that situation at hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about relationships because we understand that there are some healthy ones and there are some unhealthy ones. As a matter of fact, there are relationships that reprompt some previous situations or memories about specific traumas. And so how do we navigate those interpersonal aspects of like healing, our healing journey?
It can be so difficult because a lot of times people feel such a sense of guilt and obligation for other people's and ownership of other people's feelings. So even when they know what they want or they know they're not getting what they need, they'll still deny themselves because they want to be a good person.
Oh,
So, when it comes to relationships, really starting with a relationship with yourself, because the way that you treat yourself, it really plays into how you let other people treat you.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Starting home. I think the beautiful thing about relationships is like it's a twofold process. When you learn to treat yourself well, you know how to treat others well. However, there are some relationships that teach us how to treat ourselves. And that's the beautiful component of finding those individuals that you can not only relate to, but can also help hold you accountable along your healing journey.
Yeah, healing community is so important with healing. If we look back historically, like our ancestors, they healed within community, and now we have this idea of just being really hyper independent or just being independent in general and doing things by ourselves. And that's good. It's great that we can be self-sufficient, but when you have a community of people that can support you, it's just transcendent. And a lot of times we've moved away from that.
Absolutely. Can we talk about how you build community and how you're able to help your clients navigate their healing journey, whether it be anxiety, childhood trauma, whatever the case may be? Can you talk a little bit about more of what you do specifically?
So how I built community is like, it was a journey for me. So when I first moved to Atlanta, I moved to Atlanta without any relationships. It was just kind of like, oh, I hate the winter. I'm going to move to Atlanta. This is easy. This is like an easy transition.
Yeah.
And it took me like 2 years to make friends. And I was at an agency at the time, and the agency was so toxic. So all I did was work. And when I finally just decided like this is not for me, I need to, go outside. I have to encourage my clients to go outside all the time because I work with a lot of transplants. But when I started going outside and started opening up and I built community, like it was just like the support that I've gotten from the friends that I've made, it I don't even know if I would have started my business if I wouldn't have had that type of support. So and what I do, so my practice is Unfcked Therapy and Wellness. I don't know if I can say that. I always I'm like on the phone with people sometimes like, can I say my own business name?
Go ahead.
But,
Go ahead and say it.
but it's so important for me to show up just authentic. And what I've seen and what I've heard from a lot of clients is sometimes they don't feel like they can really show up because there's this invisible barrier between them and the professional that they're working with. And they feel judged and often they have been invalidated. So it's important for me to kind of offer a space where people can just show up and know that they can really say anything and I'm not going to bat an eyelash. And I'm not for everybody, but for the people that I'm for, I want to be available.
Absolutely. I love that, especially as you're talking about the concept of community. What I'm hearing you say is that you create communities that are based on encouraging people to show up their authentic self, simply because you have learned the importance of showing up as your authentic self. I remember I came across your website and you talked about how you were a cross between Meg the Stallion and Hillary and all of these just beautiful all Black women. And it's just a reminder that there are so many different components and elements of ourselves, and we can have these intersectionalities of ourselves instead of compartmentalizing. And I can imagine you doing the same thing or encouraging your clients to do the same thing as well. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you. Yeah, we hear so much that we're not enough. And sometimes it's just so important for me to help people understand that exactly as you are enough. The voice is telling you that you're not enough. It's not yours. It's, it's part of social conditioning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's get into some practical things, right? Because even as you said that, I was just like, that is a great way of combating our mental health concerns, reminding ourselves of who we are, who we have been born to be, and challenging all of the things that have been placed on us. And so what are some other practical ways that you've helped clients explore challenging anxiety or challenging childhood trauma?
So I provide decolonized therapy. So really breaking down how different systems have been in place to shape how we think about ourselves, things that have happened in our communities, things that have happened that changed other people's views of us. So understanding separating that from how we see ourselves and knowing that these are things we're created. These aren't things that are actually true. So we don't actually have to function within that space.
Absolutely, absolutely. And empowering us to make sure that we can get back to those things that were specifically for ourselves. And I talk about this with clients all the time because I find individuals get so DSM diagnosis focused. And I'm reminding them, like, yes, we have this diagnosis in place because of insurance, but don't get caught up in the label, get caught up in the symptoms because the DSM wasn't created with us in mind.
Absolutely.
So let's find a way to meet your mental health needs in a way that is reflective of your own personal journey. And obviously, as a treatment provider, we like to look at the client from the whole perspective, not just like what they're experiencing in this moment, but who are you? Where do you come from? What is your family's origin? Like, what is your background? What do you know about yourself? How can I help you unpack those things? And so thank you for that added element of decolonization and therapy.
Absolutely. It's so like a lot of times people think if they haven't been in therapy that you just come to therapy, you talk about your feelings and that's it. But it's a whole thing. Like you have to understand how you think, where you come from, how you see yourself. And then also just we actually have resources and tools to help you get to the next point. I hear so much, and I'm so glad you're doing this podcast with different individuals that people, think that they can just talk to their friends and family. You can't get the same thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Exactly. It's just a reminder that it's more than the talk component. It's actually doing the work. And I remember my own personal therapy journey. I always tell clients that you may come in thinking that you're working on one thing, but over time you start to realize, oh, well, I gotta challenge this, or oh, I need to reframe the way I view that, or oh, I need to like eradicate the way that those thoughts that I have towards myself. It's like you mentioned, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, therapy is like turning on a whole bunch of light bulbs. It's like, oh wait, what? Okay, I didn't know. All right.
Exactly. Cleaning that house that your great grandmother used to have that's still in the family, and taking ownership of that journey because it's so beautiful. It's okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Tiera, can you let the people know any closing remarks that you might have when it comes to your specialty and your platform and your brand?
Well, with me being a practice that centers Black women, the thing that's really important for me is that people understand that, you don't have to do any of this alone. And you don't have to be the strong friend. And you don't have to be everything to everybody. You really don't. And some of that starts, sometimes you don't have it for yourself. And it's okay that you don't have it for yourself. You don't have to be ready to come to therapy. You come to therapy right now and get ready. Sometimes people think like, oh, I need to be in this space. I need to have this job. I need to do these things. You don't. And if you're talking about cost, there are resources out there.
Absolutely. That's a bar. Thank you for dropping the mic on that. That's so important. Just do it. Like Nike says, just do it. There's no time than now. And the more that you delay, things could progressively become a little bit worse. So
People think they have to be in crisis. You do not have to be in crisis.
yeah, no, you can do a maintenance check, a wellness check. That is okay. So y'all, please make sure that you're tapping in with the Tiera Couch, LCSW at the Unfcked Therapist. That's THEUNF, no UCKED therapist. Okay. And also at her website as well. Also, the podcast is called the Legacy Speaks Podcast. And I asked this question of all of my guests: what would you like your legacy to speak about you?
My legacy. The word that comes to mind is freedom, because that's what I want for people. And honestly, time when I think about freedom is of the mind. So yeah, I just want to help people get unfucked. It's about freedom. It's about being decolonized. It's about, being happy.
Awesome sauce. Well, thank you so much for your time. Y'all, if you heard anything in this particular episode that resonated with you, please make sure that you are tapping into Tiera, and definitely please stay connected at Legacy SBKS on everything. Once again, my name is Tiera Hillsman, licensed professional counselor and emotional wellness coach. Stay tuned for our next episode, and don't forget to leave a review. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And I can't wait to see you next time. Have an amazing week.